So thank you very much indeed, John, for having accepted the invitation, for the time and generosity.
Mhm.
I'm really pleased to talk to you. So if you don't mind, I have a very introductory note about you, a brief introductory note about you, and then I will kick on with the questions.
Very good.
So, John Morreall was a professor of religious studies at the College of William and Mary in Virginia. He has also taught at Northwestern University, Santa Clara University, Pennsylvania State University, University of South Florida, and Rochester Institute of Technology. Moreover, he's a founder of the International Society for Humorous Studies. John Morreall has written prolifically on humor. Some books among the books he's authored are Taking Humor Seriously, I think 1983, The Philosophy of Laughter and Humor, 1987, Humor Works, 1997, Comedy, Tragedy, and Religion, 1999, and Comic Relief, A Comprehensive Philosophy of Humor, 2009. So, just a few of your works. Some of them are now classics of humor study. So, John, my first question is if someone, uh, not necessarily Korean, if someone were to ask why you devoted a significant portion of your research to humor, how would you respond? And how does that study of humor, intersect with religious studies? Because after all, you were in the religious department.
Right. I got interested in humor as a child. I always was the one in class who was making the smart remarks, and I got in trouble with humor from the very beginning of my education. I can remember the first thing a teacher said to me. I was 7 years old, and she singled me out and she said, "What's so funny, Mr. Morrell?" And that was supposed to that was supposed to make me just tremble in fear. But I took it as a serious question, and I said, "There's a big bug in Danny's desk," and I was laughing. And so I got in trouble with my sense of humor. A friend of mine who's in education said that students who are good at art might be sent to the art room, and students who show some musical promise might go to the music room. But students with a good sense of humor are sent to the principal's office. And that was pretty much my experience. So when I was in university, I didn't study humor directly. But when I was a young assistant professor, I knew I had to publish a book or a couple of books. I was at a place where tenure was very difficult to get. So I said, I'm going to do something new and I'm going to do something different. And I had published a lot of material on religion, but I said, I'm not going to do that. It's the same old stuff. I'm going to do something on humor. So in 1983, when I was at Northwestern University, I published Taking Laughter Seriously. In the introduction, you said taking humor seriously. The book is Taking Laughter Seriously. And that's the beginning of my career in humor. And that's now a classic that a lot of people refer back to. So I got interest. I've always loved humor, and I got interested in publishing in it because I needed a book. And once I published it, I was very fortunate. New York Times uh, published a short piece about my work. And then I started getting invitations from business groups and medical groups to talk about the benefits of humor. And I started my own consulting firm called HumorWorks, HUMORWORKS. And I've done over 600 presentations for corporations, hospitals, educational institutions around the world. I've worked in South Africa and China most recently, many countries in Europe. So I've been very fortunate that I've got a good reception, not just from academic audiences, but from professional audiences.
In one of your classical papers, John, which called a rejection of humor in Western thought, I'm quoting you. You say,
Right.
as I worked through the writings of Western thinkers on humor, I came to a more troubling conclusion that they have not simply neglected humor, but in most cases rejected it. I shall
Right.
examine the main forms which this rejection has taken, and then try to show the values of humor lost in this rejection. End of quote. What values are lost? And I mean, what values are lost when humor is dismissed, and why is it significant?
Right. To me, the main benefit of humor is that it takes us out of our ordinary, practical relationship with the world. When I'm simply alone and I'm, let's say, driving a car, I have a goal. I'm trying to reach a certain location. I'm trying to do so at a reasonable speed, et cetera. Uh, and my concerns are here, now, me, practical. What humor allows us to do is to rise above our here, now, me, practical, and view the world from a higher perspective. So to me, the ability to laugh about something is a way of uh, seeing the world from a higher perspective. And it's important that humans are the only ones who can do this. Other animals can experience fear, anger, sadness, joy, sexual desire, love. But humans are the only ones who can rise above their emotions. So very early on, my basic claim was that humor is not an emotion. It's a way of rising above emotions. A simple example. I'm having lunch with you and I spill coffee on my pants. Okay. And it makes it look like I wet my pants. If I'm in a practical mode, here, now, me, practical, I'm concerned. I'm upset. Why shouldn't have done that? I've got to go to a meeting later on. I'm going to be embarrassed. But if I can laugh about that situation, I can escape the practical emotional response and I can see the world from a higher perspective. Philosophy is famous for giving us a transcendental view of the world, a higher view of the world. And I think humor is linked to that. So my basic answer is the value of humor that has been neglected by philosophers is its ability to get us out of practical emotional responses to the world. And that's very similar to um, philosophy. The most famous philosophers who said rise above emotions are Plato and the Stoics. Their idea was that a response to life, which is mostly emotion, is less desirable, and it's in the end it makes us less happy.
Wonderful. Another quote from you, John, is somewhere else you write, I'm quoting you. Now, the reason why many teachers do not have any humor in their teachings, and indeed fear humor when it comes from their students, is that their own view of the world is relatively humorless. They teach nor in their interactions with the students because, as people, they are basically inflexible. They don't
Right.
try to cultivate playfulness or even imagination in their students because their own attitude towards things are neither playful nor imaginative. So no question here. I would be happy to hear more of that idea. I mean, to expand it, please.
Sure. If you look at courses in education in universities, almost none of them includes anything to do with humor. Uh, People are taught how to organize a lesson plan. They're taught how to give examinations. They're taught how to reinforce students' learning and stuff. But the use of humor in the classroom, it seems to me, is essential. I taught for 38 years at university level. And to me, the use of humor, it was obvious each day. First of all, students enjoy humor. They enjoy laughter. It sets up an atmosphere in the classroom of relaxation, of openness, of playfulness, and on teaching evaluations, as I say, hundreds and hundreds of teaching evaluations that I especially appreciated his sense of humor. Um, a lot of teachers are in the mode of transferring information. And if that's all you're doing in education, it seems to me you're not doing a full job. One of the places. One of the schools of thinking about education that impressed me very early was the Montessori system. I don't know if you're familiar with Montessori schools, but it was started by an Italian educator, a woman back in the early 20th century. And she said, we have to educate students not just with information and not just with skills, but we have to teach them to experiment, to be playful. And to be playful, you have to be willing to take a risk. You have to be willing to make a mistake. And that's where humor comes in handy. If I'm experimenting with things, I'm going to make mistakes. If I can laugh about those mistakes, I can keep going and succeed. So in education, it seems to me, humor is essential. In a lot of the things that I've written, I've pointed out that some of the very best philosophers had a good sense of humor. My favorite is Bertrand Russell, who's famous for all kinds of quotations. I recently revised my entry in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. It's called Philosophy of Humor. And I give several quotations from Bertrand Russell. And more recently, philosophers like Daniel Dennett, who died not too long ago. Daniel Dennett was famous for his sense of humor. So if you want examples of philosophers and their sense of humor, look up Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. The article is Philosophy of Humor. It's online, it's free, and you can get several examples there.
Wonderful. Um, then another issue for you in analyzing humor and your something that perhaps influences the whole scholarship of humor, at least yours, is the issue of amusement. In the article, Is Humorous Amusement and Emotion? You say that, I'm quoting you, I challenge the classification of humorous amusement as an emotion by contrasting it with standard emotions such as fear, anger, sadness, and love. One of the features of amusement which sets it apart from such emotions is that it does not involve practical motivation. And later on, you add that the only motivation involved in amusement might be to prolong and perhaps repeat the pleasurable experience of amusement. End of quote.
Right.
I personally believe that humor sparks amusement, but it also embodies intimacy. It can nurture friendship. It can foster an atmosphere of lightness that reduces excessive seriousness or self-absorption. So why was amusement so central to your analysis?
I don't understand the question. Do you want me to just, why is amusement important,
Why
or
analysis of amusement was important to you? Because I mean, there are other aspects in humor. There are other functions in humor that can also be taken into account or being analyzed, right?
right?
So why was amusement your
Oh,
central?
okay. Uh, for anyone in philosophy, the first thing you do with anything, love, justice, freedom, humor, whatever, you ask, what is it? So you want to take the essential nature of the phenomenon. And for me, the essential phenomenon to explain is somebody going about something. So the basic thing to study is about something. And the name I give to that is amusement. Now, you point out that this has many effects. Amusement cultivates a relationship, it creates rapport, it makes people relate. So amusement has a lot of effects, but the basic phenomenon to explain is amusement. So amusement is an awkward term because we don't use it a lot, but the experience of laughing about something. So the basic phenomenon to study in humor is this experience. And that's why I put it at the center of my analysis. And in contrasting it with emotions, I am going against many philosophers, including Noel Carroll. Noel Carroll is a friend of mine. He's written a lot about humor. And he says humor is an emotion, or amusement is an emotion. My claim is that emotions evolved very early in mammals. Mice have emotions. Mice have fear. Mice can be enraged. Mice can be sad. Dogs and cats famously have all kinds of emotions. But what they don't have is the ability to enjoy the experience of what philosophers call incongruity, surprise, a violation of their expectations. So my analysis of amusement is that it's experiencing something that you were not ready for, experiencing something incongruous. And instead of being afraid or sad about it or angry, you step back, you see it from a higher perspective, you distance yourself from it, and you enjoy the experience, the mental jolt that you get. So that's my analysis of amusement. And that's my contrast of amusement with emotions too.
Right. So I mean, if I'm going to reformulate what you said, is that amusement is not one of the functions of humor. Amusement is actually the core of humor, the kernel of humor.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Still, one small digression here for me is that, John, for many philosophers, um, um, or philosophy itself, irony was the tool to take this stance,
Right.
right? And so, how can you distinguish this kind of amusement with the irony, be it Stoic, be it Socratic, from above
Right.
view?
Right. I think there was a considerable amount of humor in philosophy over time. Socrates is the perfect example. Irony is often funny. When someone makes an ironic statement, often we laugh. You could use irony, that is, you could say the opposite of what you think and not intend that people be amused by it. You could just intend to make them realize, oh, wow, we're living in a horrible world, or things are worse than I thought. So you can use irony to make people laugh. So irony can be an example of humor, but irony can also be used seriously. Um, so, and I think philosophers have incorporated irony many, many times. Again, Russell is one of the best. Bertrand Russell is one of the best examples of someone who used irony for humor.
Right. So it would mean that if the kernel of humor is amusement, it's not necessarily the kernel of irony.
Right. Exactly. So
Right.
irony is sometimes funny, sometimes it's not. Perfect. Yep.
So in humor, philosophy, and education, I'm quoting you. You say using the ideas of Robert Nozick in his The Examined Life, dramatic comedy fosters the reflective attitude required to achieve these kinds of wisdom by getting us to drop our ordinary self-centered, practical perspectives and look at things in an emotionally disengaged way, what you already explained in answering two of my questions. So um, uh, later on, you say we learn to see ourselves from the outside as other people see us. End of quote. Uh, what are the possibilities for integrating humor into education? You explained a little of that in the schooling, in the pedagogy, but are these visible changes now, after these decades of working on humor for you, are there changes visible for you? And these shifts suggest more engaging courses or innovative teaching methods?
Well, there are many people who are interested in improving education. Some of them are professionals in education. In philosophy, there's a journal, there at least one journal on teaching philosophy, and online there are several. So I think the idea that loosening up, being more playful in the classroom, incorporating humor can have benefits in philosophy and in other fields as well. So I don't study, I don't track the current trends in education. So I don't know how many people are publishing, but I've seen many articles about the value of humor in philosophy. There have been whole conferences on this. And I would hope that there'd be more, but as I say, I don't have numbers, I don't have statistics.
Again, it's not a question, it's just a quotation from one of your work, and I
Sure.
would be happy if you can expand it. So I'm quoting you, it's because of these rationalistic cravings in existentialism that the absurdity of life is treated as tragic rather than comic. If Western thinkers had no presumptions that the world should be completely rational, then finding their lives full of incongruities and absurdities would not automatically be cause of disillusionment or despair. Indeed, without rationalistic assumptions, we might come to the view that universe as one gigantic comedy, but in Western culture, we have been led to think that all things can be brought under the dominion of reason, and so absurdity can only be disturbing. End of quote.
Right. There I was um, referring, or I was basing my discussion on a piece by Thomas Nagel called The Absurd. And Nagel points out that in existentialism, the typical response to absurdity is either despair or protest. And Nagel asked, well, if the world is, if if nothing matters, then that doesn't matter either. I love that quotation. If the world is absurd and nothing matters, then that does not matter. And if that does not matter, then it's not a good idea to protest, to shake your fist at the sky and say, why have I suffered so much, or why is the world so crazy? A better response would be to go along with the incongruity and just enjoy it. So, in other words, to respond to absurdity, there are at least two ways: the comic way and the tragic way. The typical existentialist responds in a tragic way. Um, I don't know. I don't know existentialism very well. So, but Kierkegaard was on the comic side. Sartre, I think, would be on the tragic side, and Camus, I think, is on the tragic side. But there's at least two choices here. Um,
Uh, Perhaps as a follow-up to that question, I have this tiny uh, question, remark, I don't know, idea that life often seems to occupy a space that is neither wholly tragic nor comic. For many, the bulk of existence is neither one of heightened drama nor comedy or humor, but rather a predictable, even mundane reality. Do you agree that the comic constitutes only a small part of life, or do you believe that it can be a larger, more pervasive force that also covers the mundane part?
right. Certainly, it'd be the height of irresponsibility, and it would be irrational to treat everything as comic. Many things in life require attention. They require the practical point of view. For example, the suffering of the death of over 45,000 people, mostly women and children in Gaza, is a huge, huge problem that should be addressed with utmost seriousness. So there are many situations in life that require attention. So the practical point of view, anger, fear, sadness, whatever you want to call it, is the response. Um, how much of life can be treated with comedy in a comic attitude? It depends on your life and your situation. If I were someone struggling in Gaza to just stay alive for another day and to find some clean water, I would see nothing as funny, probably. Um, those of us like me and you who have the luxury of having someone give us money to stay alive and to study and to enjoy conferences and do discussions like this, we have more time and more possibility for seeing life in its lighter aspects, its more playful aspects. So, how much of life is comic or tragedy, a comic, comedy or tragedy? A lot of it depends on the situations that you're in and the place that you live and the problems that you face. But whoops. Oh, there it is. I clicked accident. Um, so I think there's room in almost everyone's life for more comedy, but I would never say that the comic is the dominant viewpoint. It depends on your life. It depends on your situation.
Right. So in the rejection of humor in Western thought, you say, again, quoting you, not only can humor be used to produce enlightenment, but the experience of enlightenment, with its sudden realization of the illusory nature of the self, can itself be a profound kind of amusement. The biggest joke I shall ever experience is me. And once I'm liberated from attachment to my ego and can see myself with a sense of humor, the humor in all of experience comes easily. So, no question.
Okay.
I would be happy to hear, of course, more about
Oh,
illusory
oh,
nature. And yeah.
okay. Uh, uh, there I was, I think I was discussing Buddhism. And in Buddhism, the basic doctrine is there is no self, there is no enduring thing that stays the same from moment to moment. Now, as Daniel Dennett and other philosophers have shown, we tend to think that there's an I, which is the same as I yesterday, and I 20 years ago, and I as a child. Um, and that helps us get through life. It certainly organizes our experience. The idea that there is no ego, that there is no enduring self, is a bit shocking. But in Buddhism, that's a good thing because it allows you to be enlightened. That's what enlightenment is in Buddhism. Um, so I don't have anything to add to that, and I don't have any particular view of Buddhism. I don't subscribe to it or not subscribe to it, but a lot of recent philosophy, and again, I'm going back to Daniel Dennett's work, says that the way that the brain works, it produces this illusion of an enduring self, and that's good because it helps us get through life. I wouldn't take out an insurance policy, for example, if I were a real Buddhist, because there won't be any me in the future that I want to um, get paid off. So I don't have any particular assessment of Buddhism, but a lot of recent philosophy of the brain and the mind backs it up.
A bit of a longer question is in humor aesthetics and education. You say that, again quoting you, the self-containedness of aesthetic experience and humor suggests the connection of each with play, which in one sense of the word is some activity done for its own enjoy, I think, end of quote. Some paragraphs later, you add the word or insert the word imagination. I'm quoting you. Um, this delight in representing things in new ways and taking things as what they are not brings us to another point of comparison between aesthetic experience and humor, the importance of imagination in each. In the aesthetic and the humorous frame of mind, we are not locked into looking at things in just one way, but are free to shift our perspective several times if we choose. Um, so, end of quote from my question. Can we say, John, that where imagination is limited, humor tends to be rare as well? I believe that um, personally, I pose this question because I believe that ignorance, or at least Socratic ignorance, serves as a foundation for imagination. So I think it would be a big loss if we just get rid of ignorance, or get rid of, perhaps ignorance is not the best word, or if we get rid of failure, if we want to have a like failure-free culture, a culture that is only based on precision, I think that would result in lack of imagination in that scenario, and lack of, or less humor. You see my point? I mean, perhaps there are different things, but the question is actually motivated by the idea that in a culture that is more and more based on precision, be it technologically or bureaucratically or like humanly, precision and find faulting and fault-free culture, there would be less room for imagination automatically.
Oh, definitely. If you're trying to, for example, make the most money you can, suppose you're the head of a corporation and you're trying to make the most money you can, you might think that every day has to produce a measurable amount of success. Um, if you If, however, you look at people who are actually doing technological advances, I'm friends with a guy who's in charge of Google X. Google X is the part of Google that takes on new ideas in technology, experimental things. So they've got millions and millions of dollars to experiment. The basic requirement for someone who is highly experimental has to be, I will make many failures. Thomas Edison is famous. Before Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, he tried 10,000 combinations of materials. He tried cat hair. He tried iron wire. He finally came up with tungsten wrapped around, I think it was a carbon fiber. Uh, and Edison said, I didn't make 10,000 mistakes. I found 10,000 ways not to invent the light bulb. So if you look at people who are actually trying to succeed technologically, they typically have imagination. They have the ability to try one thing, fail, try another and fail, try another and fail, try another and fail. So a success-oriented culture that would suppress humor and suppress imagination would be one that wouldn't do very well in developing new products and new technologies.
Jen, the reason, perhaps I have to admit, the reason I posed that question, I was obsessed with that idea, is that it's a kind of personal trajectory in myself. I don't personally believe that Germans are inherently without humor. This idea is for me like too much and too
Right.
exaggerated. The thing, rather, for me is that this obsession with precision can eclipse the incongruities and joy of incongruities.
Yes.
And when I look at myself, like 20 years ago when I was in Iran, and you expect me to say that, oh, you were in a like autocratic land, and oh, how come you were more humorous? But I was more humorous, to be honest, more
Right.
humorous than today, that I have my
Okay.
PhD, that I have my stable life in Germany.
Right. Right. Um,
Even I go,
okay.
sorry to interrupt you, John, just
No,
I can
no,
even
you're
go
not
that far.
interrupting at all.
Yeah, I can even go that far and say that. I mean, once I finished my PhD in 2015, I had a very short conversation over a coffee or a beer, I don't know, with my with my supervisor back then, and I had this impression, I mean, as raw, unreflected, or naive back then, that even there is a kind of inverse correlation between democracy and humor. Sometimes when I look at,
Okay.
like, it's too much, I know, but it's like, or even between equality and humor. The more you feel justice, the less humor you need.
Okay.
Sometimes,
Good. Good.
sometimes you need humor to cope with. And when there
Right.
is less justice, you need to cope with more.
I think I agree with you completely. I've written a lot about humor as a coping mechanism, and a lot of the a lot of the people that I've consulted are people who deal with emergencies. Nurses, I've done conferences for nurses, and they're a wonderful audience because they have all kinds of stories of situations that were terrible, but they coped with it, their sense of humor. Um, One of the people I correlated with was a woman who was in Hawaii after there were volcanoes and people's homes were burned. Let me give you an example from nursing, because I agree completely. If you're in a place where everything is going well, you don't need humor as much. It's a luxury. Living in a less democratic state might, well, the Soviet Union We did a conference in 1989, the International Society for Humor Studies, and we had 10 people from the Soviet Union who did humor. They did cartoons and they did humor columns in newspapers. And we found just a rich tradition of humor based on the experience of communism. This is right when communism is about to implode. So I agree with you completely. Let me give you the nursing example because it illustrates so many things that I've been talking about. At a conference with 5,000 or 500, excuse me, nurses, I had a little contest. I broke them up into groups of 5 or 6, and I said, tell a story that you now tell as funny. But at the time it happened, it wasn't funny at all. So the winner was this. The woman said, Carol, another nurse, and I were on the 5th floor of our building, and we were having a coffee break. We heard this moaning and this crying, help, help, from a floor beneath. It turns out there was a patient, a psychiatric patient, who was trying to commit suicide by jumping out a window. I said, that sounds terrible. Now tell it the way you usually tell it. She said the man was very heavy. He was over 350 pounds. He chose a window that was only 18 inches wide. And he had his head and his arm out the window, and he got stuck. He couldn't get any farther. He was dressed only in a hospital gown. And if you know hospital gowns, they don't tie very well in the back. So we ran down the stairs. We swung open the doors. We ran right into this 350-pound ass. Now, is that tragic or is that comic? The answer is yes. Is it tragic or comic? Yes, it's tragic or comic. So I agree with you that in a situation that where there's lots of problems, humor will be a coping mechanism. And for nurses, it was. I could give you lots more examples of slang, hospital slang for different kinds of patients. So doctors, police officers, soldiers, emergency workers, they all have humor as a coping mechanism.
Like I was telling a friend, like jokingly the other day, that once I have less humor in my life, it doesn't necessarily mean that I am like depressed. It might mean that I'm more stable in my life.
Good,
Uh,
very good.
uh,
Sure.
right. So John, I was like, I'm quoting again another part of your research, another question actually, quoting you, the contrast here with Western philosophy, in which there is so little room for humor, is sharp. You're talking about Zen Buddhism, of course. The individual, substantial, self-aware ego, which in Zen is a fundamental illusion and the target of humor, is a foundation stone of Descartes' rationalism and the philosophies which it spawned. For this tradition, the existence of the self-conscious I as a special kind of substance, utterly distinct from the rest of the world, is the one certitude with which I can begin to think and on which I can base all other knowledge. Needless to say, this I is taken absolutely seriously in rationalism. So you go on further, and there comes my little question, that if there is humor, I mean, I have been busying myself a little with Buddhism, but also for Sufism, in my own in my own background.
Yes.
But now let's focus on Zen Buddhism. If there is humor in koan or in a haiku or in any Zen tradition, in my opinion, a large part of it is a result of some spiritual discipline, something like atraxia in Stoicism or an equanimity, let's call it, which means that it takes some effort to achieve that state which welcomes humor or welcomes incongruities. And without that discipline or effort, there is no possibility of experiencing enlightenment or having even humor. So Although I can agree absolutely with what with you that in other traditions, um, effort or religious effort result in less humor. I think that the humor that is in Zen Buddhism is not only the spontaneous moment that you decide, okay, let's enjoy that.
Oh, I agree completely. I'm not saying that humor is easy. I'm not saying that humor is mindless. And to achieve something like Bertrand Russell's jokes, you have to be fairly sophisticated. Um, so I agree completely that in Zen, it could take you 10 years of discipline before you reach enlightenment. Um, and I don't know Sufism well, but my experience, what I know is my wife is an expert in Islam. Um, from what I've learned from her, in Sufism, it requires effort also. So I'm not saying that humor is effortless, easy, or mindless. It could require quite a bit of discipline. Now, the fact that Cartesian rationalism also requires discipline and thought, they both, so two things can both require discipline. Simple. Very good. Yeah.
Sure, sure. Um, you say somewhere it's again a tiny question or perhaps no question, I don't know. You
Yeah.
say somewhere, John, that I'm quoting you, the dominant Western tradition has viewed seriousness as the highest stance and play, including humor, as merely refreshing us for more seriousness. End of
Right.
quote. Very interesting. I think that, I mean, confirming that, I add that um, there is a linguistic understanding of humor at work. And I think that has been given too much credit. People love to laugh at jokes, but are not necessarily humorous in their attitude.
They laugh at jokes, but they're not.
Yeah, but they don't entertain themselves with the inconsistencies of life. Because, like I think that when the linguistic understanding of humor has been overestimated or exaggerated, it had sort of marginalized, I don't like this term, but it has sort of put in the side, yeah, at rand the non-linguistic understanding of humor. That okay, as you explained, the coffee is on your pants. What are you going to do with that? That's not a
Right.
joke, you know?
Right. Right.
So,
Oh, I see. Are you talking about the overemphasis on joking? Jokes
right, on the
prepared
weak,
story.
on
Oh,
the
oh, yeah.
linguistic aspect.
Oh, sure, sure. Um, I agree completely. Um, in the group called the International Society for Humor Studies, most of the presentations are about jokes. Okay. Why is that? Well, jokes are they're a fixed thing. So if I tell a joke and you repeat it and you repeat it and someone analyzes it and writes an article about it, it's a fixed piece of data. So it's like something in biology. I've got a certain specimen that has a certain characteristic. Um, Humor is much wider than joking. Jokes would have evolved very late in human experience. Um, so I agree with you that there's an overemphasis on the linguistic form of humor, whereas in reality, a lot of humor is not linguistic. Um, if we have a baby, let's say a 2-year-old baby, and she's sitting in her chair and she's supposed to be eating her peaches, but she smushes them on her face. That's funny, but nobody has to say anything. If I look for my glasses for 5 minutes and then, oh, there they are in my head, I don't have to say anything. So I think the reason for the emphasis on linguistic humor is that it's easier to analyze. Um, it's much harder to analyze real life experiences of humor that don't involve language. Um, Facial expressions, right? If something happens and you make a face, I could laugh about that, but that's not language. So I agree with you completely. And the reason for the emphasis on jokes is that they're easier to analyze. In life, however, telling jokes is extremely rare. I can't remember the last time I told anyone a joke. And it was only as an illustration of some theory of philosophy. It wasn't, I never call a friend and say, "Did you hear the joke?" A horse walks into a bar and the bartender says, "Why the long face?" Okay. I never do. So jokes are easier to analyze. They're fixed pieces of data, but they don't play a big part in human life.
Uh, yeah, I want to make a small digression, but yeah, perhaps I can make it. I mean, very small question
Sure,
is that
go
there are,
ahead.
John, there are a lot of people I see that I mean, at first glance, you don't think of them as having sense of humor, but they can very good laugh at your jokes, or they can be they're very open to humor.
Right.
What kind of people are these people in your view?
Yeah, uh, I don't have an analysis or a theory of people who are appreciative of humor but can't create it. Um, I post a lot of things on here. I'll give you an example. Are you on Facebook?
Very inactive, but yeah, I have an account. I,
Okay,
you know,
okay.
not that active.
Every day I post two things on Facebook. Half the time they're funny, and half the time they're just strange and odd. Uh, I've got a whole group of people who click like, but they never have a good comment in return. They never reciprocate. Here, I'll give you an example. I'm into oil painting. Since I've retired, I've done a lot of oil painting. I don't know if this is going to show. Oh, this is
Oh,
here's a here's a painting that I whoops.
okay, great.
Um, it's Putin as a ventriloquist. Okay,
Right.
a lot of people said I love it, I love it, but they don't reciprocate. The analogy here, I think, is with art. There are many people who love art, who know a great deal about the history of painting and sculpture and stuff, but they don't do anything themselves. Now, what can you say about that? I don't have anything interesting to say about that. I'm glad that there are people who appreciate humor, but I wish people would reciprocate. I wish they would say, yes, and um,
Yeah,
you
sometimes.
see that? Yeah, go
Right.
ahead.
Sorry, I mean, some while ago, I was feeling, I was like, funnily, I was analyzing my feelings and emotions. I was thinking, okay, what I'm missing is actually not the people who have sense of humor, nor the people who are moral and so sincerely precise and everything. I just need these people who appreciate humor.
Okay, yeah. Um, everyone everyone who has something to offer others wants an audience, an appreciative audience. So it's good that there are such people. Um, yes, yeah.
Right. So I have two
Um,
questions left, John.
okay.
Right. So one of them, well, two of them are equally a little long. Yeah. So you say, I'm quoting you, at the level of the individual, I argue tragedy embodies mental rigidity and comedy embodies mental flexibility. Socially, tragedy values hierarchy, patriarchy, militarism, and tradition, while comedy questions all of these. Most generally, tragedy sees life as individual struggle, while comedy sees it as a social adventure. End of quote. Now, my question, my little question, my perhaps a little contemporary question. Do you think that there is a kind of humor at work in politics today, a kind of humor which is at peace with militarism, patriarchy, hierarchy, and tradition? And I mean, we can call it reactionary comedy, we can call it reactionary humor, but it exists apparently.
Yes, yeah. I'm very disturbed by the use of humor in the United States by the people who follow Donald Trump. I don't think that Trump has a sense of humor that is a virtue, that has the features that I've praised. It doesn't show mental flexibility. It
Hmm.
certainly doesn't show a sense of openness or playfulness. It's only to humiliate, to put down people, to make people hate other people. So it's the same kind of humor you get in traditional racism and sexism. Um, so I agree completely that there's a kind of humor, call it reactionary humor is a good way to do it. It uses humor simply as a strategy for making people hate other people and putting down other people. Donald Trump got the nomination to be Republican candidate for president in 2016 by standing on stage with, I think there were 10 other candidates who were trying to be the Republican nominee. And he humiliated each one of them. He humiliated Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio, and he went down the line. He called Little Marco and Lion Ted Cruz, etc. Now, is that humor? Yes, but it's just the bare bones of humor, and it's used to do something. It's used for a negative purpose. So I agree with you completely. That kind of humor, it seems to me, is obviously very different from the good kind of humor. Um, you're living in Germany, so you didn't watch the presidential campaign, the nominating conventions in this country. But the Democratic convention was one of lightness and self-deprecating humor. Donald Trump never uses self-deprecating. The Republican convention used lots of humor, but it was mockery. It was put down. Now, mockery as a form of humor is very, very old. In tribal humor, in tribes, um, this kind of humor is very common. So I agree with you. It is a kind of humor, but it doesn't have the virtues that I've been discussing. It doesn't have the mental flexibility. It doesn't have the openness to experience. It doesn't have the playfulness. It doesn't have uh, the ability to laugh at oneself. As I say, Trump never laughs at himself.
Fair enough. Great. Thank you. My last question, John, is a quote not from you, but another scholar that I was also influenced by him once I was writing my thesis, Conrad Hayers.
Oh,
Um,
yes. Oh,
right.
wonderful.
Yeah, he's a wonderful writer. I mean, he writes that, I'm quoting from him, from this perspective, I don't know which perspective, from this perspective, look at my beginning of the quote. From this perspective, humor in Zen is often a kind of comic midwifery in the Socratic sense of a technique for precipitating or provoking an inner realization of the truth. Zen shares with the Socratic view in a doctrine of recollection that the teacher does not deliver the truth as a stork might be taught to deliver a baby, but in the sense that a midwife comes to deliver the baby. That is, enlightenment and its wisdom and compassion comes not from without, but from within. Humor in this context is not of a variety of meiotic techniques, Yupodia, Yupdia, he calls it actually, that might be effective in bringing the Buddha Dharma to conscious awareness and existential realization. So, end of this quote, the first part of quote was important for me to ask, um, what is particularly, I mean, it's not a question, I just like want to share this idea and hear your idea about it. What is particularly interesting and even fascinating for me in that kind of humor is that it functions as a tool for enlightenment, capable of manifesting um, even as laughter or even sometimes ridicule when needed, an approach that the modern individual might easily denounce as intrusive and hierarchical.
Uh,
So I don't know, I could get my point across, but the thing is that um, Conrad Hayers is talking about a humor that is inherent in some traditions, like in Zen Buddhism, and there um, the person that is experiencing humor that is experiencing enlightenment can undergo a lot of experiences, and one of them is humor. So humor is the way to enlightenment, and you're open to that because of the trust that you have to the person, because of the trust that you have to your master, for example, in that case, yeah. So in the lack of that trust, that would come across as immediately as ridicule or mockery, even. You see my point?
Uh, a student in Zen who did not trust the master.
Sorry, I didn't
Are you,
get.
a student in Zen who did not trust the master, are you saying that that person would be mocking the master?
No, no, no,
I don't know.
would be frustrated at the master.
Oh, he'd be frustrated, right?
Right. I mean, the point is that I think there is a kind of brutal humor sometimes in Zen Buddhism.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And
The
that
slap on the side of the head.
right, exactly. Yeah. And the reason
Right,
that it sounds brutal or it comes like of brutal for us today is that that trust or that enlightenment is not a prerequisite for this kind of interaction that we have today.
right, right.
You know,
Yeah, we don't have, in Western culture, we don't have something that's like the experience of a Buddhist student and the master. We don't have enlightenment either. So it's in the brutality is puzzling to Westerners. How can it be funny that the master hits you on the side of the head? Um, um, so so we don't Westerners don't understand Zen very well. At least most Westerners who haven't studied the tradition. Um, but I don't have anything extra
you know, even
to
in my
add to that.
personal experiences,
Yeah,
I remember when I used to go to Iran to visit my family because still my family's there. And
sure,
so every like 6, 7 months, I miss them. I feel homesick. I go there. Okay. I
sure,
want any, yeah, yeah.
sure,
So every time I go there, I see that, okay, I am interpreting it or I am over interpreting it as something like brutal. But, you know, it's my brother, the same brother, making fun, like being humorous, you know? So I think that this individual, this Mahdi that is here, this development of this individual makes it a bit harder to deal with those kind of, you know, incongruities or those
sure.
kind of, you know, again, we talked about it earlier, but
Right,
immediately accuses my brother as being brutal, for example, in that scenario.
right. What does your brother do that you see as brutal?
No,
He
like we are in
mocks
the
you.
swimming pool. I can't swim, and he just like pushes me to learn to
Oh,
swim.
okay,
You
okay.
know,
I
I
understand.
mean, 20 years ago, I would laugh at it. I would say that,
Okay,
okay, look, I mean, he's funny,
okay,
he's silly, he's being
okay,
silly. I'm silly. I don't know swimming. I
okay.
am like 44. Yeah. But now I would immediately say, no, that's not your right. That is my right. You know, it's,
I see.
you
I
know,
see.
like that is,
Right, right.
yeah. So I don't need to
Uh,
go back to Zen Buddhism. Even in my daily life, I see that.
no, good. Now I see what you're saying. Good.
Right.
Good.
So
This has been good fun. I really appreciate the care and the studiousness that you've shown looking up all this material.
thank you. It was my pleasure.